There are two kinds of compounds in Cambodia. The first has barbed wire, armed guards, and thousands of people locked inside running scams. It cost Americans $10 billion last year. It gave this country a name it never asked for, Scambodia. The second has sandstone walls carved with gods and a moat 6 kilometres around. It was built 9 centuries ago. It is the largest religious structure on Earth, and the world came to know it through a Hollywood film starring Angelina Jolie. One compound traps people, the other draws them from across the world. Both exist in the same small country. And what you just heard is only the beginning. The rest of Cambodia is waiting. It will look nothing like what you'd expect. Now let's begin. North of Phnom Penh, deep inside a stretch of lowland forest, stone temples stand half buried in roots and undergrowth. This is Sambor Prei Kuk, capital of the Tonle Kingdom in the 7th century, predating Angkor by more than 150 years. Over 100 structures remain scattered through the trees, including 10 octagonal temples found nowhere else in Southeast Asia. Nearby, a small red brick ruin sits at the edge of a village, bicycles parked against its crumbling walls. The architecture here, the carved lintels, the layered towers, became the template for everything Angkor would later build. East of Angkor, past hours of red dirt road, a stone pyramid rises above the jungle canopy. This is Prasat Tom at Ko Ker, 36 metres tall, the largest pyramid structure in Southeast Asia. For 16 years beginning in 928 AD, Ko Ker served as the capital of the Khmer Empire under Jayavarman IV. Then the court moved to Angkor and the forest closed in. At ground level, the 5 red brick towers of Prasat Brahm stand wrapped in tree roots, their walls softened by moss. Nearby, a weathered stone doorway frames nothing but green light and silence. Water falls in white threads over staggered rock at Phnom Kulen, a mountain draped in jungle north of Siem Reap. In 802 AD, on this same plateau, a king named Jayavarman II declared the Khmer Empire independent from Javanese rule. That act, a ceremony on a forested hilltop, set into motion a civilization that would reshape the region for the next 6 centuries. South of Phnom Kulen, the land flattens into a broad plain crossed by rivers and irrigation canals. Somewhere in this lowland, in the early 12th century, a ruler named Suryavarman II began construction on a temple dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. From the air, the structure appears first as a rectangular moat, nearly 6 kilometres in total circumference, surrounding a belt of forest, which in turn surrounds a complex of sandstone towers rising in tiers toward a central peak. This is Angkor Wat, the largest religious structure ever built. At ground level, its corridors stretch for hundreds of metres. Bas-reliefs carved into the walls depict battle processions, mythological scenes, and rows of figures moving in unbroken lines. The detail is precise: soldiers in formation, chariots pulled by horses, gods churning an ocean of milk. The stone was quarried from Phnom Kulen and transported here by canal and river. Every surface was carved. And yet, for all its scale, Angkor Wat was only one piece of a much larger urban system. Recent litter surveys mapped what lay beneath the canopy. A sprawling network of roads, reservoirs and residential grids stretching across more than 400 square kilometres. At its height, the Greater Angkor area supported over 1 million people, making it the largest pre-industrial city the world has known. But almost nothing of the domestic city survives. The temples were built in stone. The palaces, houses and markets were built in wood, and the wood is gone. What remains is stone, and stone tells a particular story. A few kilometres north of Angkor Wat stands Angkor Thom, the last great capital of the empire. Built by Jayavarman VII in the late 12th century. At its centre sits the Bayon, a temple unlike anything else in the complex. More than 200 stone faces gaze outward from its towers, each one slightly different, each one half smiling. Scholars still debate whether the faces represent the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, the king himself, or both. No consensus has been reached. A monk in orange robes walks beneath the towers, carrying a blue umbrella through the midday heat. By the time Jayavarman VII built the Bayon, the empire had shifted from Hinduism to Mahayana Buddhism. This transition is visible throughout the complex. Hindu carvings overwritten with Buddhist imagery, lintels rededicated, shrines reoriented. The gods changed their names, but the stone remained. East of the Bayon, the jungle reclaims what the builders left behind. At Ta Prohm, silk cotton trees have grown through the stone walls, their roots spreading across terraces and prying apart door frames. The temple was deliberately left in this semi-restored state, a decision to preserve the image of ruin rather than erase it. Moss covers carved reliefs. A headless Buddha sits in a darkened corridor. In 2001, the site appeared in the film Tomb Raider, and the images of trees consuming stone became one of Cambodia's most recognised visuals. Not far from Ta Prohm lies pre-Angkorian, built as a Buddhist university and administrative centre in the late 12th century. Today, its corridors are quiet. Moss-covered stone blocks line the paths and thick roots weave through the carvings on the walls. Tourists pass through an ancient gateway, framed by towering trees, the entrance narrowed by centuries of growth. Farther south, on a small hill overlooking rice paddies and the Tonle Sap basin, sit the three towers of Prasat Phnom Krom. Built around 900 AD, its elevated position offered a clear view of the surrounding plain. Today, goats graze the slope below the ruins, and the green valley stretches unbroken toward the lake. The town closest to the temples is Siem Reap, a name that translates to Siam defeated. A reference to a military victory over Siam centuries ago. From above, Siem Reap spreads across a flat plain in a patchwork of red terracotta roofs, narrow streets, and low-rise buildings packed tightly together. Motorbikes and tuk-tuks move through the grid below. No structure in the modern town rises higher than 65 metres, the height of Angkor Wat's central tower. The rule is not formal law but observed convention, a quiet acknowledgement that what was built 9 centuries ago still governs what gets built today. Through the centre of town winds the Siem Reap River, its banks lined with trees, walking paths and small bridges that connect one neighbourhood to the next. The river looks natural, but it has been shaped by human hands, modified by ancient Khmer kings as part of a hydraulic network that fed the rice fields and carried the Angkor civilization through the dry seasons. Today, the river is quieter. Near one bend, a rustic water wheel turns slowly in the current, an image more decorative than functional, but a reminder of what the waterway was built to do. The city exists because of the temples. That relationship is not metaphorical. Tourism accounts for more than 60% of Siem Reap's economy. The Angkor Archaeological Park covers roughly 50 temples spread across hundreds of square kilometres, and a 3-day visitor pass costs around $60. Buses arrive from Phnom Penh each morning. Flights land from Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, Seoul. The cycle has continued in various forms for nearly a century. The Grand Hotel d'Angkor opened in 1929, hosting European visitors who came to see the ruins during the French colonial period. At the city's edge, the urban landscape gives way abruptly to forest. A single paved road cuts through dense green canopy toward the distant cluster of rooftops, the boundary between modern Cambodia and the jungle that still surrounds its most famous monuments. The contrast is sharp. On Fenside, tightly packed houses and motorbike repair shops. On the other, trees. In the evenings, the economy shifts indoors. Night markets and the stretch known as Pub Street layer a modern tourist infrastructure over what was once an ancient grid. A pattern visible in other temple towns across Southeast Asia, where the commercial district wraps around the sacred one. Siem Reap received the designation of ASEAN City of Culture in 2021, a recognition that the town's identity extends beyond its role as a gateway. Its population of roughly 225,000 residents manages a balancing act, serving millions of visitors each year while maintaining a city that still looks, from the air, like it belongs to the plain rather than dominates it. The towers remain the tallest things in sight. From the air, Tonle Sap looks less like a lake and more like a shallow sea. The largest body of fresh water in Southeast Asia, spreading across the lowland centre of Cambodia. Along its edges and through the waterways that feed it, roughly 1 million people live on or beside the water. Entire communities float on the surface. Schools, temples, clinics, all built on wooden platforms lashed together and anchored to nothing permanent. In the floating villages nearest the lake, clusters of homes with thatched roofs drift in loose formations along muddy channels. Narrow boats move between them, carrying supplies or ferrying children. Many of the residents are ethnic Vietnamese Catholics, a community of several thousand people whose presence on the water dates back generations. They have no land. The lake is the land. Beyond the villages, the water opens into flooded rice paddies and geometric irrigation canals. Herds of water buffalo wade through shallow riverbeds, guided by handlers walking the waterline. Arrow-headed fishing nets and square traps stand in rows across the murky surface, tended by fishermen in small motorboats. Farther out, colourful tour boats navigate mangrove channels, passing stilt houses that line the tributaries. The waterways connect everything, village to field, field to forest, forest to lake. There are no roads here, only current. Northwest of Phnom Penh, the city of Battambang sits along the Sangka River. Its name translating to lost stick, drawn from a legend of a giant king who threw a magical staff and missed. A large statue at the entrance to town still marks the tale. From above, the old quarter spreads in clusters of red-tiled roofs, with a French colonial avenue running along the riverbank. And the low structure of Sa Nat, the central market, anchoring the district below. Outside town, a narrow set of railway tracks runs through green fields and across small bridges. On them, homemade railcars carry tourists along what locals call the bamboo train. A system improvised in the 1980s after war destroyed the railway and landmines blocked the roads. The cars are little more than bamboo platforms on wheels, powered by small engines, moving just fast enough to feel precarious. To the south, flooded rice paddies stretch to the horizon, their surfaces broken by white egrets circling and landing in loose flocks. Water lilies cover a nearby reservoir. Along the Sangka, a boat moves slowly between the trees. Rising above the plain, Phnom Sampo is a limestone mountain crowned by a golden Buddhist temple. Each evening, around 6 o'clock, roughly 15 million bats emerge from a cave in the cliff face and stream across the sky in a dark, unbroken ribbon. The exodus lasts nearly an hour. Below the mountain, a small village sits in the last of the daylight. In 2023, Battambang became the first Cambodian city admitted to the UNESCO Creative Cities Network, designated a creative city of gastronomy. The Mekong curves southeast through Cambodia in wide brown loops, its banks lined with grassy islands and dense vegetation. Near Kampong Cham, a colonial watchtower stands on the riverbank, and white stupas rise from a temple complex half hidden in the trees. At a bend farther south, a colossal reclining Buddha lies surrounded by forest, visible only from the air. On the river itself, a pagoda sits at the water's edge, its tiered roofs facing a green island in the current. In the quieter reaches upstream, around 100 Irrawaddy dolphins remain. Cambodia is their last stronghold. Their closest living relative is the killer whale. Before Phnom Penh there was Ao Dong, a green hill rising from the floodplain northwest of the capital, its summit crowned by a white temple complex, and its slopes dotted with ancient pagodas half swallowed by vegetation. For over 2 centuries, from 1618 to 1866, Ao Dong served as the seat of Khmer kings, the place where power rested before it moved downriver. The city it moved to sits at the junction of 4 rivers. Four rivers converge here at a point Cambodians call Chaktamuk, 4 faces. Few national capitals sit at such a junction. From the air, the rivers spread in wide brown arcs around the city centre, crossed by bridges and lined with high-rise towers, their glass facades catching the light. According to local tradition, Phnom Penh takes its name from a woman called Pen, who in 1372 found 4 Buddha statues inside a floating tree and built a hill, a Phnom, to house them. That hill still exists. Wat Phnom sits today at the centre of the city, a white Buddhist structure with layered spires surrounded by a dense park of old trees. Visitors walk the open pathways between the temple grounds and the traffic beyond. South of Wat Phnom, the Royal Palace complex lines the riverfront. Its golden rooftops and tiered spires rise above manicured lawns and stone pathways. Inside the compound stands the Silver Pagoda, its floor laid with 5,000 silver tiles, and housing a golden Buddha adorned with over 9,000 diamonds. Pigeons circle the grounds. Nearby, another ornate temple complex faces the Mekong, its gilded buildings and red-tiled roofs visible from the river, set among low-rise neighbourhoods and scattered trees. During the French colonial period, Phnom Penh earned the name Pearl of Asia. Wide avenues were laid out along the river, and Art Deco buildings rose alongside Buddhist temples, giving the capital an appearance that rivaled Saigon and Hanoi. Some of that architecture still stands, older blocks with weathered facades, colonial-era structures repurposed or left to age. At the centre of a large roundabout, the Independence Monument rises in tiers of Khmer-style architecture built in 1958. Cars, motorbikes and tuk-tuks stream around it continuously. The monument marks the symbolic centre of a city that, less than 20 years after its construction, would be emptied at gunpoint. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge marched into Phnom Penh and forced the entire population into the countryside. Over the next 4 years, an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people, roughly a third of Cambodia's population, were killed through execution, forced labour and starvation. the demographic scar remains visible. Today, more than half of Cambodia's population is under 25. The skyline that now rises along the Mekong belongs to a different era. Modern glass towers and construction cranes dominate the riverfront. In one district, the Gold Tower 42 stands with its reflective golden facade, one of the most visible landmarks on the riverfront. Along the Basik River, high rises cluster beside a commercial shopping centre. While across the water, older neighbourhoods with red and blue roofs press against the banks. The contrast between the two sides is visible from any elevated point. Farther from the centre, the Win Win Memorial stands as a white tower in the middle of a vast geometric plaza. A monument to the end of internal conflict, set against the flat expanse of the surrounding city. Beyond it, Phnom Penh Port lines the Mekong with hundreds of shipping containers stacked in neat rows. Cranes rising above them, a small town and rice fields visible just past the facility's edge. The capital's name came from a woman building a hill for 4 statues. Centuries later, the city keeps building, upward, outward, over what was lost. At street level, the skyline disappears behind shop fronts and traffic. Tuk-tuks weave through intersections, where vendors line the curbs and children chase pigeons across open stretches of road. Near the central market, the distinctive dome of Psath Mai rises above a grid of busy streets, cars and motorbikes circling its perimeter. The energy of the scene does not translate to income. The country's GDP per capita sits around $1,900 a year, less than a 50th of the United States. In the neighbourhoods farther from the centre, the gap between the city's two economies becomes visible. Corrugated metal shacks press together along unpaved lanes. A young girl holds a bread roll in a doorway. A boy carries a book through a yard of collected waste. Adults sort through piles of plastic and scrap in the open air. Inside one home, a woman rests on a woven bamboo floor, the walls thin enough to hear the street outside. Dollars circulate here as freely as real. Many shops price their goods in both. The future here walks barefoot. South of Phnom Penh, the road narrows toward the coast and the landscape shifts to river towns and farmland. Kampot sits along a muddy bend where old Chinese shophouses with red-tiled roofs line the waterfront, and an ornate iron bridge from the French era still spans the river. Before the port at Sihanoukville was built in the 1950s, this was Cambodia's main gateway to the sea. Inland from town, the pepper plantations begin. Geometric rows of green vines stretch across the valley floor, many covered with black netting, with Phnom Vor Mountain rising behind them. Kampot pepper holds a geographical indication, the same kind of legal protection given to champagne. The Khmer Rouge destroyed nearly all of it. What grows here now was replanted from almost nothing over the last few decades. In the lowlands nearby, salt fields spread in flat square ponds divided by earthen walls. Workers in long sleeves and wide-brimmed hats rake the white crystals into piles by hand. The surface of each pan still enough to mirror the sky. Above Kampot, Boka Mountain rises to over 1,000 metres. A French Hill station was built here between 1921 and 1925 at the cost of roughly 900 workers' lives. At the summit, a large white Buddha with a gold sash sits on a tiered platform facing the forest. Nearby, old pagodas and a temple complex called Five Boats overlook the coastline below. Off the coast, a wooden ferry crosses the open water toward Koh Tonsei, Rabbit Island, where palm trees line a sandy shore and straw-roofed bungalows face the Gulf of Thailand. Sihanoukville was carved from jungle in the 1960s and named after the king. It was built as Cambodia's only deep-water port, a gateway for trade on a coast that had none. For decades it remained a small seaside town, fishing boats in the harbour, wooden houses with colourful roofs clustered along the shore, mangrove forests lining the quieter inlets. Then the money arrived and the town changed almost overnight. By 2019, roughly 90% of businesses in the city were Chinese-owned, and close to 80 casinos operated within its limits. A Belt and Road Special Economic Zone pushed the local GDP per capita to $4,000, double the national average. Hotels and apartment towers rose along what had been a quiet coastline. The vice-governor was quoted saying he had no choice but to accept the comparison to Macau. In 2021, a raid on the Galaxy World casino compound revealed more than 400 foreign nationals held against their will. The city earned a name that stuck, Scambodia. But offshore, the coast tells a different story. Koh Rong lies a short boat ride from the mainland, its shores still lined with palm trees and white sand. Wooden piers stretch into turquoise water, and fishing boats in bright paint rest in sheltered bays. Bungalows sit between the trees, modest and low. At night, bioluminescent plankton light the shallow water in pale blue, the ocean glowing where the waves break. Sunlight reaches the seabed in patterns that shift with the current. The beaches remain largely undeveloped. But drive west from Sihanoukville, and the coastline breaks into islands and estuaries where the Cardamom Mountains meet the sea. Dense mangrove forests, among the largest in the region, line the winding waterways, their canopy unbroken for kilometres. Farther out, the islands of the Koh Stuck archipelago scatter across calm water. Their forested hillsides dropping to fishing villages of stilt homes with red and blue roofs. Boats move slowly through the bays. The Cardamom Range behind them shelters the largest contiguous jungle on mainland Southeast Asia. The same remoteness that once hid the last Khmer Rouge fighters now protects over 60 threatened species. Cambodia is a country that survived one of the 20th century's darkest chapters and chose to rebuild. 40,000 of its citizens live today as landmine amputees, a legacy of 3 decades of conflict. And yet the country is routinely described as one of the gentlest places in Southeast Asia. We started at stone ruins older than Angkor and followed a civilization that built the largest religious structure on Earth, then watched its capital disappear into the forest. We floated on a lake where entire communities live without land. We stood on a hill where bats darkened the sky each evening. We walked through a city whose skyline rises from the ashes of its emptying. We tasted pepper that nearly vanished and stood on a coast that was sold. "17 million people live here. More than 90% of them practice Theravada Buddhism, the only country in the region where the faith is written into the constitution. The temples are not decoration. They are structure. Cambodia is not what you expected. It never was. And it is still becoming something else.